MultiGreen, building attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled multifamily real estate through impact investing.
Welcome to the MultiGreen podcast. I'm your host, Randy Norton, and for this episode, two members of our MultiGreen team, Steve Morris, our head of operations, and William Zheng, our senior associate in acquisitions, will join me for a panel discussion. We are going to discuss how attainability shapes every aspect of our work here at MultiGreen. Enjoy our conversation. So glad you guys are here today. Steve, let's dive right in. What is your role and responsibility here at MultiGreen?
Sure, Randy. Thanks for having us. So as head of operations at MultiGreen, I'm really focused on execution of all of our initiatives, as well as building out this platform as we're still relatively new. With attainability in mind specifically for today's call, I'd say that my role really comes down to making sure that we're focused on delivering successful projects, achieving the returns that we target, as well as our ESG initiatives and reporting, which are heavily weighted towards attainability.
Also with us today, we have William Zheng. William, tell the audience what you do here in acquisitions.
Thanks, Randy. I source development opportunities in each of our MSAs, prepare materials for investment committee and investors, and I also manage the existing acquisitions opportunities.
Well, it sounds like between the both of you, you're staying busy. I'd like to ask Steve first, what does attainability in operations mean to you, and how are you driving attainability in all that we do?
Well, Randy, you've often used the phrase profit with a purpose, and I appreciate that. And I think it goes back to the capital that we raise and our investors and our stakeholders. They have consistently emphasized the value of impact as well as the value of financial returns. It's a two-way street. And I would say that really goes into our underwriting. It goes into the targeting and the acquisition process when we first initiate in a market and initiate with certain land transactions and projects we want to pursue. I would say that underwriting at MultiGreen, it isn't just a traditional financial model and investment committee memo. Of course, we do that, but we also assess the impact of every project at the specific project level. And the internal proprietary way in which we measure impact, the impact rate of return, that includes attainable economic, social, and environmental dynamics. So focusing really on attainability today, we scorecard each project, and we do that through the operations department, specifically through asset management in tandem with acquisitions. And we're identifying each of these attainable economic, social, and environmental dynamics during that phase before we even hit the ground running.
Thanks, Steve. That was a really great response. That is very comprehensive and multidisciplinary. From the mandate in the operations department, William, is attainability in acquisitions possible? And how do you underwrite attainability within the acquisitions department?
Attainability certainly is attainable. In the acquisitions department, we underwrite every opportunity to a discount of market rent. And we specifically target MSAs that have experienced a lot of growth in recent years and have been witnessing extreme supply shortages, which often create worsening attainability. So there is plenty of opportunity for us.
So, William, if attainability is achievable, in what markets do you pursue attainability in?
The markets that we pursue attainability in are Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, Reno, Las Vegas, Phoenix, Albuquerque, Dallas, and Austin.
It sounds like that's a frontline defense to the net in-migration coming from California. But what about the markets like Boise, Salt Lake City, Denver? Those are very high growth markets as well.
Oh, absolutely. But we also have to juggle between barriers of entry and attainability.
William, thank you for the summary of those markets. Do you plan on going into additional markets in the future?
Definitely. Attainability is a nationwide issue and a global issue. And so there is possibility that we extend our scope to the East Coast and abroad.
If I were to point over to Steve and his team in the operations department, you see the numbers, you see the information and data coming in, and William is out on the front lines executing, really our pipeline. Steve, this is a real big challenge. What are we doing from a financial modeling perspective to achieve attainable rents or make these acquisitions, quote unquote, attainable?
Well, Randy, I think it all comes down to research. It's research and planning, and then executing that plan within budget, within schedule. That's probably stating the obvious, right? But attainability is certainly achievable when you set out to achieve it and you're successful in managing the project up to that standard. One thing I want to make sure we touch on in this conversation is when we speak about attainability, that conversation is always focused on rent, and for obvious reasons, rightly so. But there's many ancillary factors that come into play and often get overlooked when you're talking about the total cost of residential real estate. And in the operations department, we have a huge focus on those as well. And what am I referring to? I'm referring to costs around energy and water utilities, internet access, renters insurance, even the cash outlay of a security deposit. And so while those are overlooked, MultiGreen, that's not. It's a focus of ours. And we're focused in operations on ways to solve those issues and increase the affordability or the attainability of our apartments. And we plan on delivering our product that saves resident money while also helping them build credit. And in the meantime, we own those ancillary products and we capture that revenue stream. And that, of course, helps us in our underwriting as well as, maximizing the return on these projects.
I often hear when we're out in the marketplace underwriting transactions, whether it's from landowners or investors or lenders, they say, hey, this can't be done. And obviously you're taking concessionary returns. What would your response be to that?
I would point back to the focus of our stakeholders, the focus of our board and our investors. And I would say, again, to your point on profit with a purpose, it's a balance. It is a balance on the impact we're creating and our impact rate of return, as well as our profitability and our returns, our traditional IRRs and equity multiples. It is possible to achieve both, and we are attempting to prove the model.
Attempting is a very good word. How far along are you in the model in proving out these qualitative benefits and impact? It sounds like your team in operations has identified a way forward, but how are you executing on it, and what phase of execution are you in? Is this just preliminary thoughts? Are you in the R&D phase? Are you in search for solutions? This is a key thing to the MultiGreen initiative. So where are you in the process?
That's a great question, Randy. So most people think of us as a startup, but we're really a spin out. And yes, we are currently building our first projects, but we are a spin out from a family office, as you know, with a legacy in data centers. And there is a rich knowledge or a playbook, if you will, in developing the digital infrastructure and the energy generation that is so critical in those data centers. We're leveraging that playbook and then right-sizing it for the multifamily asset. And that's how we really plan on going into our first two products with confidence that we're going to be able to deliver on that promise of digital infrastructure and providing quality, high-speed, affordable internet, as well as being able to deliver on the promise of electricity generation and being competitive in the market, even saving residents money compared to the local competitors.
William, let me ask you, when you're underwriting your assumptions and your inputs, what is the most difficult thing to underwrite to make our properties attainable?
The most difficult thing to underwrite is rents. In a lot of our markets, these rents have been climbing at record rates. They're reaching record levels, and we still need to make the project attainable.
it seems like the market is working against us and the law of supply and demand is really challenging our underwriting environment.
Randy, in your position, you communicate with all of our stakeholders, investors, employees, residents, the board, outside third parties. Obviously, when we talk about attainability and we talk about rents, the revenues of this business, there's a dynamic tension between our stakeholders, whether it's our investors looking to make impact and a return, or our residents looking for an attainable place to live. I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we balance those and how we move forward with this vision.
Steve, that's a really good question. I can think of 5 or 6 stakeholders right offhand that MultiGreen is really serving. Number one, it's all about the resident. But to get to that point, there's other stakeholders involved, right? There's the investor that's providing equity. There's the lender who's providing debt. There are the cities and municipalities who are allowing for these projects to go forward, and they have certain needs. You have, of course, the residents. You have the property manager. You have, of course, the employees and the MultiGreen team who are incentivized to perform. So when you bring in those dynamics, each stakeholder is wanting a different outcome. But I think attainability is a multidisciplinary solution and a multi-stakeholder solution to what everybody is doing to run a business more efficiently, run a property more efficiently, run a city more efficiently. And this is all about the sustainability of all of our businesses and lives. So for example, I think from a resident perspective, if they could get a discount to market, like we're not providing the Taj Mahal here or the absolute highest Class A market rents in the market, but we are providing that kind of service through digital amenities and other features of our property. So if we could get these residents onto our property and let them thrive through our programming, I think that's attainable. That is a more attainable way and a more sustainable way of living. If we could do something similar for the cities, if we could give them more density or a mixed income approach, maybe eventually setting aside some units, especially if we're in the downtown urban core and we're building something like an SLI product in Seattle. Different municipalities are going to define attainability different and what attainable development means to them, and so on and so forth. Lenders, what is an attainable loan? You can't be giving us 8 to 12% type interest-only loans during construction and expecting us to succeed. When you get scale and what we're trying to attempt to do here, you get efficiencies in the debt origination fees as well as the interest during construction, yield maintenance, and other covenants. We're not asking for covenant light, we're just asking it to be market and bearing in mind the demographic that we're trying to serve. When it goes to the investors, we can't expect opportunistic returns, but we certainly can expect value add, core type returns. And when you start looking at durations and hold periods longer, the terminal values become, I think, very interesting. And when you look at the investors, we also need to understand that this is a multi-revenue business model now, and it's a building as a service. And I think that's what's really unique to MultiGreen, Steve, is we really are understanding the multiple friction points, and we are solving them. Again, William, going to attainability, it sounds like concessionary rents or concessionary returns are required to position these properties as quote-unquote attainable. Is that accurate?
No, that's not accurate. Concessionary rents does not equate to concessionary returns. In our underwriting, we demonstrate that you can have attainable rents, but also above market returns.
Let's go now to each of you. We ask every podcast participant what attainability means to them, how they would define it. And I want to go first to you, Steve. What does attainability mean to you?
Randy, in my mind, attainability is caring about our residents. It's helping our residents succeed, achieve their goals, living in safe communities, raising their families at a price point in which they can afford.
And what about you, William? What does attainability mean to you?
Attainability to me is fulfilling one's needs without being stressed, whether it's financially or psychologically. And most importantly, attainability is a right.
Well, with those definitions of attainability, we thank you, Steve and William, for participating on this podcast, and we thank all of our listeners for being with us today.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.
Thank you for listening. Join us as we build 40,000 attainable, sustainable, and tech-enabled multifamily homes by 2030. And if you like the content you're hearing, hit the subscribe button. Follow us at Think MultiGreen and sign up to learn more at www.multi.green.